Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Today we'll talk about Hanukkah. What is it? Why is it important? I am busy. Why should I bother celebrating? Let's start with some background. This is from Daniel, chapter 8. Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns. And the 2 horns were long, but one was longer than the other, and the longer one came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, and no animals could stand before him, neither was there any who could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will, and became great. And I was considering, behold, a male goat came from the west over the surface of the whole earth, and did not touch the ground. And the goat had a prominent horn between his eyes. He came to the ram that had the 2 horns, which I saw standing before the river, and rushed at him in the fury of his power. I saw him come close to the ram, and he was moved with anger against him, and struck the ram, and broke his 2 horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he threw him down to the ground and trampled on him, and there was no one who could deliver the ram from his power. The male goat became very strong. But when he was strong, the large horn was broken, and instead of it came up 4 prominent horns towards the 4 winds of heaven. Further down in Daniel chapter 8, the vision is explained. The ram which you saw that had 2 horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia. The male goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn that is between his eyes is the first king. As for that which was broken, in the place where 4 stood up, 4 kingdoms shall arise out of his nation, but not with his power. In the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their full measure, a rash and deceitful king shall arise. His power shall be great, but not by his own strength. And he shall cause terrible destruction, and he shall succeed in whatever he does, and he shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. Through his cunning he shall cause deceit to prosper by his influence, and he shall be great in his own mind, and without warning he shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be shattered, but not by human hands. And that is from Daniel 8, 1-27. As prophesied by Daniel, Alexander, the 1-horned goat, took over the entire known world. Alexander died, and his kingdom was divided between 4 of his generals. These were the 4 horns of the goat that replaced the single horn. We'll concern ourselves with the 2 kingdoms headquartered in Egypt and Syria. Antiochus III, king of Syria, reigned from the years 3538 to 3574 from creation, or 222 to 186 BCE. He won a war with King Ptolemy of Egypt and gained possession of the land of Israel. At first, he treated the people of Israel favorably. He lost a war with the Romans and had to pay tribute. The burden was passed on to various peoples of his empire, including Israel. Antiochus died, and his son Seleucus IV took over, and life got worse for the Jews. As if that were not enough, there were Jewish Hellenists, people who accepted idol worship in the Syrian way of life. They were the liberals of the day, opposed to the conservatives. Yochanan, the high priest, was opposed to the Syrian Greek influence in the Holy Land. In contrast to Judaism's emphasis on truth and moral purity, the Greeks idolized outward beauty. The Jewish people could not give up their faith in God and accept the idol worship of the Syrians. The Hellenists hated Yochanan, and one of them ratted him out to the king's commissioner. He explained to the commissioner that within the temple was a great deal of wealth. A couple of paragraphs ago, we saw Seleucus had money problems and needed fast cash. Rather than calling Rapid Cash or Dollar Loan Center, Seleucus sent his minister, Hylidros, to take the money from the temple treasury. Yochanan, the high priest, begged him not to do it. Hylidros paid no heed and entered the gate of the temple. Suddenly, he became pale with fright. The next moment, he fainted and fell to the ground. After Hylidros came to, he did not dare enter the temple again. This reminded me of Rabbi Shaul on his way to Damascus, when he was blinded by the great light, which no one with him saw. Hylidros must have seen something no one else could see. In the year 3586, or 174 BCE, Seleucus was killed, and his brother Antiochus IV began to reign over Syria. He was a tyrant and contemptuous of religion. He was called Epiphanes, meaning the God's beloved. Several of the Syrian rulers received similar titles. But a historian of his time, Polybius, gave him the epithet Epimanes, madman, a title more suitable to the character of this harsh and cruel king. Desiring to unify his kingdom through the medium of a common religion and culture, Antiochus tried to root out the individualism of the Jews by suppressing all the Jewish laws. He removed the righteous high priest Yochanan from the temple in Jerusalem, and in his place installed Yochanan's brother, Joshua, who loved to call himself by the Greek name of Jason. For he was a member of the Hellenist party, and he used his high office to spread more and more of the Greek customs among the priesthood. Unifying the kingdom through a common religion and culture. Where do we see this? Revelation 17, 1-2. One of the 7 angels who had the 7 bowls came and spoke with me, saying, "Come here, I will show you the judgment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed sexual immorality, and those who dwell on the earth were made drunken with the wine of her sexual immorality." False gods are often referred to as prostitutes. The seed of this one world government are being planted as we speak. There is much hullabaloo regarding inclusion and diversity. Note, even today, that does not include normal people like us. In that day, spoken of in Revelation 17, adherents of the one world religion will kill Jews and Messianic believers who worship the one true God. Joshua, or Jason, was later replaced by another man, Menelaus, who had promised the king he would bring in more money than Jason did. When Yochanan, the former high priest, protested against the spread of the Hellenist influence in the Holy Temple, the ruling high priest hired murderers to assassinate him. Meanwhile, Antiochus was engaged in a successful war against Egypt, but messengers from Rome arrived and commanded him to stop the war, and he had to yield. Meanwhile, in Jerusalem, a rumor spread that a serious accident had befallen Antiochus. Thinking he was dead, the people rebelled against Menelaus. The treacherous high priest fled along with his friends. Antiochus returned from Egypt, enraged by Roman interference with his ambitions. When he heard what had taken place in Jerusalem, he ordered his army to fall upon the Jews. Thousands of Jews were killed. Antiochus then enacted a series of harsh decrees against the Jews. Jewish worship was forbidden. Torah scrolls were confiscated and burned. Sabbath rest, circumcision, and the dietary laws were prohibited under penalty of death. Rabbi Eleazar, a man of 90, was ordered by the servants of Antiochus to eat pork so that others would do the same. When he refused, he was put to death. Thousands of others likewise sacrificed their lives. So it will be during the tribulation for Jews and Messianic believers who will refuse to worship the anti-Messiah or his image. Antiochus's men went from town to town and from village to village to force the inhabitants to worship pagan gods. One day the henchmen of Antiochus arrived in the village of Modin, where Mattiyahu, the old priest, lived. The Syrian officer built an altar in the marketplace of the village and demanded that Mattiyahu offer sacrifices to the Greek gods. Mattiyahu replied, "I, my sons, and my brothers are determined to remain loyal to the covenant which our God made with our ancestors." Thereupon, a Hellenistic Jew approached the altar to offer a sacrifice. Mattiyahu grabbed his sword and killed him, and his sons and friends fell upon the Syrian officers and men. They killed many of them and chased the rest away. Then they destroyed the altar. Mattiyahu left the village of Medellin, probably for health reasons, and fled together with his sons and friends to the hills of Judea. Loyal and courageous Jews joined them. Utilizing guerrilla warfare, they destroyed the altars built by the Syrians. Before his death, Mattiyahu appointed his son Judah the military leader. Judah was called Maccabee, a word comprised of the initial letters of the 4 Hebrew words Mikamoka Ba'alim Adonai, who is like you, O God. And that is found in Exodus 15, verse 11. Antiochus sent a general to wipe out the Maccabees. Greatly outnumbered, the Maccabees defeated the Syrians. Antiochus sent a second general, who was also defeated. Antiochus was going to get it right this time. He sent 40,000 men under the command of 2 generals, and after a series of battles, the Maccabees defeated the Syrians. The Maccabees returned to Jerusalem liberated. They entered the temple and cleared it of the idols placed there by the Syrian Vandals. This too was predicted by Daniel in chapter 8. This too is a precursor to the tribulation. Matthew 24:15 says, and this is Yeshua speaking, "When therefore you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place," let the reader understand, "then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." Judah and his followers built a new altar, which he dedicated on the 25th of the month of Kislev in the year 3622, or 139 BCE. Since the golden menorah had been stolen by the Syrians, the Maccabees now made one of cheaper metal. When it was time to light it, they found only a small cruse of pure olive oil bearing the seal of the high priest, Yochanan. It was sufficient to light the light only for one day. By a miracle of God, it continued to burn for 8 days until new oil was made available. That miracle proved that God had again taken his people under his protection. In memory of this, our sages appointed these 8 days for annual thanksgiving and for lighting candles. The war was not over. The Greeks were still quite interested in occupying the land. Internally, there were Hellenists who sided with the Greeks against their own people. Hanukkah is the celebration of miracles. The first miracle was the preservation of the Jewish people and culture. Antiochus' goal was to assimilate everyone into Greek culture and remove Jewish identity. Had he been successful, Yeshua would not have been born as he was into a Jewish culture, as prophesied in the Tanakh. That would have created a problem or two. Judah Maccabee was a priest, not a warrior. His small band of volunteers miraculously defeated tens of thousands of trained soldiers. And the story ends with 1 day's supply of oil burning for 8 days until more purified oil could be produced. Wow! The division in those days is very much like the division of today. Conflicts between the Hellenists and conservatives were heated, and sometimes there was bloodshed. Today there is a lot of anger over differing worldviews. Attempts to assimilate Jewish people goes way back. Laban tried to get Jacob's family to assimilate. When Jacob returned to Canaan, his sons were marrying the local women. Samson could not leave the Philistine women alone. On it went into modern times, with outsiders either trying to assimilate or completely destroy the people. Reading through this series of events, many things remind me of today. A large part of our society today are godless heathens, like the Greeks, who valued intellect. Many of today's godless heathens are well educated. Some are quite angry that in the 21st century there are still ignoramuses, like us, who still believe in God. Others are quite angry that in the 21st century there are still infidels, like us, who do not believe in their God. But, as in the time of the Maccabees, those people are not the problem. They make up the culture around us, and we all know who they are. Today, like the Hellenists, people in synagogues and churches are voluntarily blending into the culture around us. If you see people who attend churches and synagogues out and about, you sometimes cannot tell them from the general population. They're foul-mouthed, they blend in, and in general are not good witnesses for Yeshua. To give you a couple of examples, I used to work for XO Communications in Austin, Texas. Most of the guys would, once a week or so, go to lunch at a local girly bar. They did not even invite me because they knew I would not go anyway. They did not necessarily agree with me, but knew we were not alike. Contrast that with my time in the Army Reserves in San Antonio. San Antonio has a large Mexican Catholic population. One of the guys mentioned something about church. One of the other guys questioned, "You go to church?" The first guy was a bad witness, and even the heathens knew he was behaving badly. John 17:14-16, Yeshua is praying. "I have given them your word, and the world hated them, because they were not of the world, just as I am not of the world." I'm not asking you to take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. These and other verses tell us several things. While in this life we have to work for our food, housing, and other necessities, just like everyone else, be good stewards of all God has entrusted us with. We're subject to human authority placed over us, such as government or work. We may not fit in or even be liked, but we do not have to share the worldview of those around us, nor are we to act or talk like them. Whether they like us or not, it should be obvious we are different. If we are recognized as different, we can be a good witness for Yeshua, as opposed to someone who blends in with everyone else. And if that describes any of us, what better time to rededicate our lives to Yeshua than during this Hanukkah season, the Feast of Dedication. While there are many lessons to be learned from Hanukkah, why should we celebrate it? As is taught in many churches, why not just learn its lessons and move on? There is a short article on the Jews for Jesus website that answers that very question. Hanukkah is mentioned only one time in all of Scripture, and that is in the Brit Hadashah, or the New Covenant. At that time, the Feast of Dedication took place at Jerusalem. It was winter, and Yeshua was walking in the temple in the colonnade of Solomon. So the Jews, meaning Judeans or the Jewish leadership, gathered around him and said to him, "How long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly." And that's found in John 10:22-24. Like the expectations of many of our grandparents or great-grandparents, the popular picture of the Messiah in Yeshua's time was that he would be a super Maccabee, a warrior who would destroy Israel's enemies and bring in everlasting peace. What better time than Hanukkah to ask Yeshua to come right out with it, if he were the Messiah, and to show it by his actions. Yeshua's response was that he had already made it clear by his actions, which were not those of a super Maccabee, but a healer and a teacher. Yeshua was the kind of Messiah who, rather than destroying Rome, went to his death to atone for our sins and subsequently rose from the dead. The Maccabees did a great service by preventing the faith of Israel from being swallowed up in Antiochus' plans and the plans of his Hellenistic Jewish cohorts. Yet history shows that their descendants became corrupt, power-hungry, veering from the biblical ideas of kingship and priesthood. Could it be that we need something more than Maccabees to deliver us from something worse than Antiochus? To deliver us from our own sins and corruption? As the lights of the menorah are lit night after night, could it be that we should consider Yeshua the light of the world and the deliverance that he offers? This year, the first night of Hanukkah is Thursday, December 7th. We will celebrate here at 6 p.m. I will speak on Yeshua represented in the Hanukkah. I hope to see everyone here.